The raven came to Winterfell on a grey, wind-swept morning, its wings heavy with the damp of northern mist. Ned Stark stood in the courtyard, the bird perched upon his arm as the words of Stannis Baratheon unfolded before his stern eyes. Stannis had never been a man for soft words or half-truths. His letter was as hard as the man himself. The boy Joffrey was no true son of Robert. Cersei had betrayed the king's bed, filling it with her brother's seed, and every golden-haired child was proof of it. The Iron Throne had been stolen, and Stannis, by blood and law, claimed it as his right. Ned read those words in silence, the snow-damp air biting his skin. He knew in his bones the truth of it, for Jon Arryn had whispered the same suspicions before his sudden death. Yet in another life, Ned had hesitated, had thought to move carefully, to weigh the politics, to give Cersei time to flee. That path had led him to chains and betrayal, to the headsman's sword. But here, in this telling, the wolf made a different choice. Ned summoned Maester Luwin, Robb, and his most trusted men. He read the letter aloud, his voice heavy but steady. When the words fell silent, he turned to his son. "Robb, you are near grown, and one day you will bear the weight I carry now. Remember this. When treason rots in the heart of the realm, honor is not enough. We must act." Robb's young face was tight with thought, his grey eyes shining with the same northern steel as his father's. "What will you do, father?" Ned looked out toward the white horizon, the wind pulling at his cloak. "I will stand with Stannis. He is Robert's rightful heir. If we do not move swiftly, the Lannisters will sink their claws into the throne, and the realm will bleed." Within days, Ned sent ravens to Dragonstone, swearing his allegiance. His words were simple and stark. "I will bear my sword and my house for your cause." The North remembers its duty. When he reached King's Landing, he did not walk into the spiders' web as a lone wolf, but as a man already tied to a greater cause. He carried Stannis' words like a weapon, and though Varys whispered and Littlefinger smiled, Ned did not bend. He sought out Sir Davos Seaworth, who had been sent quietly to sound him out. In a dim chamber of the Red Keep, away from curious ears, Ned met the Onion Knight. "Lord Stark," Davos said, bowing low. "My Lord Stannis sends his thanks. He says the realm has too few men of honor, and fewer still with the courage to act upon it." "Tell him this," Ned replied, his voice firm. "I do not fight for his thanks. I fight for Robert's memory and for the realm. The boy Joffrey is not Robert's son. The truth is bitter, but it must be swallowed whole." The Onion Knight nodded, but his eyes showed the weight of his lord's cause. "Then you know this will mean war." Ned's jaw tightened. "War comes whether we will it or not. Better to face it with clean hands than bloody ones." And so it began. Instead of warning Cersei in private, instead of playing the quiet game of secrets and letters, Ned struck like a wolf. He placed his faith in Stannis and the Baratheon claim. He called the banners in the north, sending riders racing from Winterfell to the far reaches of his domain. Men sharpened their swords and oiled their armor, though they did not yet know for what war. In King's Landing, Cersei's smile faltered when she learned of Ned's allegiance. She had counted on his honor to make him slow, hesitant, easily trapped. But now he stood beneath Robert's bier with the truth in his hand and Stannis at his back. "You think you can tear down my house?" she hissed when the court gathered to hear the matter. Ned's eyes were cold as winter. "Your house is already rotting. It only needs the world to see it." It was not a clean affair. Blood was spilled in the halls of the Red Keep when the Lannisters tried to seize Ned before his words could spread. But this time, the wolf was ready. With Stannis' men already slipped into the city under Davos's guidance, the fight turned swiftly. Lannister guards were cut down, gold cloaks scattered, and whispers ran wild through King's Landing that the Queen's children were bastards born of incest. The throne room trembled not with Joffrey's shrill claim, but with Stannis' wrathful roar. For within days, the Lord of Dragonstone himself rode into the city, iron in his eyes and fury in his voice. He came not as a beggar asking for loyalty, but as a king claiming what was his by law and right. And by his side stood Eddard Stark, the Wolf of the North, who for once had chosen not to hesitate. The Game of Thrones had begun, and the first move was fire and steel. The city had not seen such chaos since Robert's rebellion. Word spread like fire in dry grass. Queen Cersei had been seized, her children stripped of their claim, and the Iron Throne now held by Stannis Baratheon with the backing of Lord Eddard Stark. The gold cloaks, once thought loyal to the crown, had splintered, half bent the knee to the new king, while the rest scattered or hid in fear of being branded traitors. Cersei had fought like a lioness cornered. In the throne room, she had screamed defiance until Sir Barristan Selmy himself removed her crown and laid it upon the steps. She had cursed him, cursed Ned, cursed Stannis, swearing that the Lannisters would return with fire and vengeance. Yet her power in King's Landing was broken. Jaime still sat a prisoner of the Stark army after being captured on the King's Road, and Tywin's host was far to the west. For the first time in years, the Queen's claws had been blunted. Ned Stark did not revel in her fall. When he looked upon her, he saw not triumph, but sorrow for the realm. 3 children, innocent of their birth, wept as their mother was dragged away. Sansa clutched his hand tightly, torn between fear and pity, while Arya glared at the Queen, as though ready to draw her blade herself. "Keep the children safe," Ned ordered, his voice low but unyielding. "They will not pay for their parents' sins." Stannis had no such softness. "They are bastards born of treason. By law, their lives are forfeit." His cold blue eyes bored into Ned's, unblinking. "By mercy, they are spared." Ned countered. "Robert would not have butchered children, and neither will I stand for it. They will be held in comfort until the realm is settled." For a long moment the two men faced one another, as unyielding as winter stone and summer fire. At last Stannis turned away with a grunt, though his frown spoke of discontent. He would not forget this challenge, nor the debt it carved between them. Outside the Red Keep, the city simmered with unease. The small folk cared little for kingship or bastardy. What they feared was famine and war. Breadlines stretched along the streets, and whispers filled the air. "The stag sits the throne again," some said. Others muttered, "The lions will come for blood." Varys, ever the whisperer, flitted to Ned with his soft smile and softer words. "My lord, King's Landing is not so easily tamed. You have struck a bold blow, yes, but bold blows often rouse sleeping giants. Lord Tywin will not sit idle, while his daughter and grandchildren are held like birds in a cage." Ned's answer was as cold as his homeland. "Then let him come. The North remembers." But in truth, Ned knew the danger. Tywin Lannister was not a man to forgive insult or defeat. He would raise his banners, and when he did, blood would wash across the riverlands and beyond. Stannis knew it too, and his council was already shaping for war. The small council itself had been torn apart. Littlefinger had vanished from the city the night of Cersei's arrest, slipping through shadows like the rat he was. Grand Maester Pycelle was locked in his chambers, trembling with fear as his loyalties were questioned. Only Sir Barristan remained, loyal as ever, his white cloak unstained by treason. "Stannis Baratheon is king," the old knight said firmly in council. "The realm must rally, or the lions will tear it apart." And so the letters went forth. Ravens blackened the skies, carrying word of Joffrey's illegitimacy and Stannis's rightful claim. To Winterfell, to Riverrun, to the Eyrie, to Storm's End, and the Reach, the truth flew on inked wings. Each house was called to bend the knee or be branded traitors, yet the truth did not unite, it divided. In the Vale, Lysa Arryn clutched her son and refused to act, shrieking of assassins and plots. In the Riverlands, Lord Hoster Tully wept with relief that his daughter's husband still lived, but he knew war was inevitable. Renly Baratheon, ever smiling and ambitious, mocked his brother's stern rule and whispered that the realm would rally to a younger, fairer king. And in the Westerlands, Tywin's fury burned hotter than dragonfire. By nightfall, the city gates clanged shut, and the banners of the crowned stag rose above the walls. Ned stood upon the battlements with Stannis, watching as the torches of the city flickered in the dark. "King Robert is dead," Stannis said grimly. "Now the realm must bleed for the truth." Ned looked at him, his heart heavy. "I pray it will not come to that." But he knew it already had. For even as they spoke, Tywin's riders were thundering through the west. Ravens screamed across the sky, and the Game of Thrones was no longer whispers and shadows. It was war, and this time Eddard Stark would not face it with honor alone, but with the full weight of the North and the fury of Stannis Baratheon. The Lannisters did not mourn in silence. Word reached King's Landing within weeks. Lord Tywin had called his banners. From Casterly Rock to the Golden Tooth, from Lannisport to the deep mines of the west, armored men poured forth, their crimson cloaks snapping in the wind. Tywin did not waste time with words or letters. He answered the capture of his daughter and grandchildren with fire and sword. Villages burned in the Riverlands, and the black smoke rose high enough for ravens to carry tales to every corner of Westeros. At Riverrun, Lord Hoster Tully wept bitterly. The Lannisters had struck first at his lands, his people, knowing his son-in-law was bound to the Starks. Robb Stark, only 16, now had no choice but to call his banners. "We ride to war," he told his bannermen at Winterfell, his voice deeper than his years. "The lions have struck at our kin. The North will answer." Ned read his son's letter in the Red Keep, his heart torn. He had meant to shield Robb from the storm, to fight the battle himself beside Stannis. But war cares nothing for a father's hope. It dragged sons into the mud as quickly as kings. Meanwhile, the capital itself stirred with unrest. Stannis ruled with a mailed fist. He hanged gold cloaks who had taken bribes, seized the treasuries, and forbade the excesses that had grown common. Under Robert's rule, bread was rationed, taverns were shuttered, and taxes raised. The small folk muttered that King Stannis was colder than winter, a shadow of his dead brother. Ned counselled patience. "If we rule too harshly, we will turn the city against us before the lions even reach the gates." But Stannis only frowned. "I do not care if they love me. I will have their obedience. That is law." As the city buckled under his stern hand, a new threat rose from the south. Renly Baratheon, handsome and smiling, had declared himself king. He had the support of Highgarden, and the Tyrells dressed him in flowers and gold, proclaiming him the true heir, the king who would bring peace. Tens of thousands of swords bent to him, not for law, but for charm and promise. Stannis raged when the Raven came. "Traitor," he thundered, "my own blood dares to usurp me." "It is not law he claims," Ned said grimly. "It is the hearts of men, and hearts, your grace, can be swayed more easily than laws." Thus the realm was split. 3 kings now vied for the Iron Throne. Stannis, the stern rightful heir, Renly, the charming usurper with the Reach at his back, and Robb Stark, hailed by his men as king in the north, though Ned had begged him in letters to keep the crown. "Unclaimed. Father," Robb's raven wrote, "the men will not follow me south unless I wear the crown. They will not bleed for another king. They will bleed for the north. Forgive me, but I had no choice." Ned's hand trembled as he read the words. He had bent his honor for Stannis, tied the North to the Baratheon cause, and yet his own sons, lords, now sought independence. Duty warred with blood in his heart, and for the first time since Robert's death, he felt truly weary. But there was no time for weariness. Tywin's host marched east, cutting through the riverlands like a sword through cloth. Sir Gregor Clegane burned and butchered, leaving fields of corpses in his wake. The cries of the small folk carried to the Red Keep, where Ned sat in council. "With Stannis, we must strike Tywin before he reaches the city," Ned urged. "If he surrounds us, King's Landing will starve." Stannis nodded reluctantly. "We march at dawn. The lions will find no easy prey in the stag and the wolf." The camp was set upon the Blackwater, the banners of Baratheon and Stark fluttering. Side by side, men spoke in hushed tones of what was to come. Two armies would clash, but it was not just the Lannisters they feared. Whispers ran of Renly's golden host in the south, of Tyrell's spears glinting in the sun, of a war that could stretch across the whole realm. That night Ned stood by the river, gazing at the dark waters. He thought of Catelyn in Riverrun, of his children in the Red Keep, of Robb now wearing a crown he was too young to bear. Honor had led him here, yet the realm was no closer to peace. Instead, it stood on the edge of a war worse than Robert's rebellion. Ser Davos approached quietly. "You look troubled, my lord." "I fear I have loosed a storm I cannot contain," Ned confessed. "Every choice I make, another war rises from it." The Onion Knight gave a tired smile. "Aye, but storms cannot be stopped, only weathered. Pray that when it breaks, you and yours are still standing. By dawn, the horns blew and the banners lifted. The wolves of the north and the crowned stag marched west, their steel catching the morning light. And waiting for them, beyond fields already burned, was Tywin Lannister, the lion who had never lost a war. The clash was inevitable, and the realm trembled as the storm finally broke. The morning of battle came cold and sharp. The sky streaked with red, as if the gods themselves had bled at dawn. On one side of the field, the banners of the crowned stag and the direwolf fluttered against the rising sun. On the other, the crimson lion of House Lannister roared across the plain, its host spread wide like a sea of blood. Ned Stark sat his horse beside Stannis, his helm clasped beneath his arm. His grey eyes swept over the enemy line, the glittering armor, the endless spears. "He has more men," Ned said quietly, "at least 10,000 more." Stannis did not flinch. His jaw was stone, his eyes like cold fire. "Then we must kill 10,000 more. Tywin will not stop. If we yield this field, he will starve King's Landing into submission. Better to die here with swords in hand than behind walls like rats." The horns blew, and the ground trembled with the march of armored men. The first wave crashed like thunder as Lannister cavalry charged. The north held firm, their shields locked, spears braced against the earth. Horses screamed, men fell, and blood spattered the trampled grass. Robb Stark rode with the vanguard, leading the men of Winterfell. Though young, his sword flashed true, and the bannermen rallied to him as if he were his father reborn. Ned's heart clenched with fear and pride all at once. But there was no time for a father's thoughts. Stannis had already spurred his horse, his blade raised high, and the Baratheon infantry surged forward with their king. The battle was chaos, a storm of steel and screams. Arrows darkened the sky, plunging into shields and flesh alike. The Northmen fought with grim fury, their war. Cries echoing across the field, "The North remembers!" Beside them, the Baratheon men roared of fire and law, driving forward with relentless strength. But Tywin Lannister was no fool. His center bent beneath the charge, only to spring the trap. Hidden cavalry burst from the flanks, striking like the jaws of a lion. Stannis cursed as his men faltered, the enemy pressing them back. For a moment it seemed the tide might break. Ned saw the danger. He raised his sword high, his voice cutting through the din. With me, for Winterfell!" He led a countercharge, the northern riders crashing into the Lannister flank with such force that the red tide buckled. Steel rang and men fell in heaps, the grass slick with blood. Robb was there too, his blade red to the hilt, fighting not as a boy but as a wolf grown full. Through the haze of battle, Ned caught sight of Tywin himself, his golden armor gleaming, his banners clustered tight. The old lion did not ride into the melee. He directed it with the cold precision of a butcher. Every move, every charge, every retreat was his hand guiding the slaughter. Stannis cut his way toward the center, his sword a storm of iron. He fought like a man possessed, relentless and unyielding. "For Robert!" he bellowed, driving his men into the heart of the enemy line. Hours dragged like years. The sun climbed high, then dipped low, yet still the battle raged. By dusk, the field was a graveyard, the cries of the dying mixing with the caw of circling crows. The Lannisters held, but they had not broken the stag and the wolf. Neither side could claim victory. Both bled too heavily to stand tall. At last, the horns sounded retreat. Tywin pulled his men back, disciplined even in defeat, leaving the ground. Littered with corpses but not conceding the field, Stannis did not pursue. His host was shattered, his men too weary to press the attack. When silence fell, broken only by the moans of the wounded, Ned dismounted heavily. His armor was scarred, his face streaked with blood, not all his own. He found Robb among the living, his sword arm trembling, his eyes wide with the horrors of war. "You fought bravely," Ned said, clasping his son's shoulder. "But war is not glory. Remember what you've seen here." Robb only nodded, too weary for words. Stannis joined them, his face a mask of iron. "We bloodied the lion, but we did not break him. He will come again, and harder." Ned looked out. Over the dead, the banners fallen in the dirt, the carrion birds already feasting. "And so will we," he said. But in his heart, he wondered how many more men could be fed to this war before there was nothing left but bones. That night, as the fires burned and the healers worked through the endless rows of wounded, Ned walked among them. He heard the cries, the prayers, the curses. Young men gasped their last breaths, clutching at him as though his presence alone might give them peace. It weighed on him heavier than any crown, heavier than any sword. The war was only beginning, yet already it had claimed too much. And in the shadows of the camp, whispers spread that Renly was marching north with an army twice the size of either. The storm had broken, but darker clouds gathered on the horizon. The smell of death still lingered on the battlefield when the first whispers of Renly's host reached their camp. Survivors spoke of a golden tide rolling north, banners bright with roses, knights armored like suns. The Tyrells had given Renly their full strength, 20,000 swords, 10,000 more, until his army swelled larger than both stag and wolf combined. When the news reached Stannis, he raged like a storm at sea. In the command tent, his fist crashed against the table, scattering maps and carved pieces. "Renly dares," he roared. "A younger brother, no true claim, and yet he parades as king with flowers at his back. They mock me, Ned. They mock law itself." Ned stood across from him, silent for a time. He studied the map, the positions of Tywin's host regrouping in the west, Renly's golden tide sweeping from the south, and their own battered forces licking wounds on the Blackwater's banks. "It is not law that wins men's hearts," Ned said at last. "Renly offers them smiles, feasts, promises of peace. They would sooner follow a golden lie than a bitter truth." Stannis turned on him, eyes hard as iron. "And would you, Stark? Do you speak for him now?" Ned met his gaze unflinching. "I speak for the realm. If we turn on each other, the lions will devour us both. The Lannisters sit in Casterly Rock, sharpening their claws. Renly marches with half the realm's strength. And here we stand, bleeding and divided." For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the brazier fire. Then Davos spoke softly, as if to soothe a storm. "My lords, if Renly has the men and Stannis the claim, perhaps there is a path forward. United, no lion, no usurper could stand." But Stannis would not bend. His pride was as unyielding as stone. "I will not share my crown," he growled. "Renly is no king. He is a thief draped in roses. If he will not kneel, I will cut him down." Ned's face hardened. He saw the shape of it now, clearer than ever, the realm spiraling into ruin, each man clutching at crowns while the small folk burned. Honor had guided him here, but honor would not stop brothers from spilling each other's blood. That night, he walked alone among the tents, the moans of the wounded still thick in the air. Robb found him by the river, his face drawn but steady. "Father," he said, "our men call me king. They raise me up, though I never asked for it, but I see the truth. There are too many kings already." Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Then be a king they can trust, not for glory, not for crowns, but for the lives of the men who follow you. If we cannot bind this realm, it will break, and we with it." Robb's eyes were somber, but young fire still burned in them. "Then perhaps it is time to make hard choices." The next morning, Renly's banners appeared on the horizon, a glittering host spread wide as a golden field. Trumpets sang, bright and proud, and the lords of the Reach rode tall beside their chosen king. Renly himself was resplendent, his green armor polished, a crown of antlers gleaming upon his head. He smiled as though he had come to a feast, not a war. The two armies met under a white banner for parley. Stannis stood stiff as a blade, his face shadowed with contempt. Renly dismounted gracefully, his smile easy, his words smooth as silk. "Brother," Renly said, spreading his hands, "why waste blood? You are stern, aye, but the realm does not love sternness. It loves peace, it loves joy. Stand beside me, and together we will end the lions. I will wear the crown, but you shall rule at my side as hand, as true power behind the throne." Stannis' lip curled. "Your throne is stolen. Your crown is false. Bend the knee, Renly, and I will spare you." The air grew tense, swords clinking softly as men shifted. Ned stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "My lords, hear me. Every day we quarrel, Tywin grows stronger. Every crown you wear is another grave dug for the realm. I beg you, for Robert's memory, find common cause before we all drown. In blood." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Renly's smile wavered, Stannis' glare deepened, and Ned felt the weight of the realm balanced upon a knife's edge. But the knife cut, as it always did. Renly laughed lightly, shaking. His head, always so grim, Stark, always so bound to duty. "But you cannot change men's hearts. They love me, not Stannis, and love is stronger than law." Stannis' hand went to his sword. "Love will not save your head when I strike it from your shoulders." The parley ended in fury, and the armies returned to their camps, the peace shattered before it had even been born. Ned walked away with a heaviness that threatened to break him. The storm was not only coming, it had already fallen, and in the shadows of Renly's camp darker things moved. Whispers of a red priestess, of fire and shadow, of a magic that could slay kings in their tents. The Game of Thrones had grown crueler, and even Ned Stark, who had already bent honor for survival, felt the ground crumbling beneath his feet. The night was thick with fog, the air damp and heavy, as though the gods themselves held their breath. In Renly's camp, laughter echoed. Late into the dark, songs, feasts, and boasts of tomorrow's glory. He had the numbers, the hearts of his men, and the confidence of youth. "Tomorrow," he had said, raising his cup high, "the lion and the wolf will kneel, and Westeros will know peace beneath my crown." But in the camp of the stag and the wolf, the mood was grim. Stannis stood brooding in his tent, his jaw clenched tight. The maps lay before him, though he hardly looked at them. His thoughts were elsewhere, on his brother, on the crown, on the law he believed the world mocked. Ned watched him with wary eyes, uneasy at the change in the air. Then she entered, Melisandre of Ashai, robed in red, her hair aflame in the dim light. Her eyes glowed like embers, and the air seemed to grow warmer as she approached. "The Lord of Light has shown me the path," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of something not of this world. "Renly Baratheon must die. Only then will the true king rise." Stannis turned his face, but not in denial. His silence was consent enough. Ned stepped forward, anger flashing in his grey eyes. "No, we do not kill kings in their tents by sorcery and shadows. If Renly must fall, let it be by steel under the sun, with the realm watching." Melisandre's smile was like fire licking at cold stone. "You cling to honor, Lord Stark, but honor will not save the realm. Darkness must be met with fire. Only one king can stand, and the Lord has chosen." But Ned would not yield. "If you unleash this witchcraft, Stannis, you will win no loyalty. You will be feared, and feared kings do not last." Stannis's face was drawn, his voice low. "Do you think I have not bled enough for loyalty, Stark? They mocked me at court, ignored me for years while Robert drank himself to death. Now Renly parades with roses and laughter, while I am left with scraps. I am king by right, yet the realm spits in my face. If the gods themselves offer me justice, should I refuse it?" The firelight flickered across his stern features, and in that moment Ned saw a man, not just driven by law, but consumed by bitterness. He spoke again, his tone almost pleading. "Do not let anger guide you, Stannis. You have a claim, and I have sworn to it. But if you win by shadows, you will lose the realm." For a heartbeat, Stannis looked as though he might listen. But Melisandre's hand touched his arm, and his jaw tightened once more. "Justice," he muttered, "by any means." Ned left the tent in fury, but unease gnawed at him through the long hours of the night. He could not shake the sense that something unnatural moved beneath the fog, something foul creeping closer with every breath. At dawn, the camp stirred with alarm. A rider galloped from Renly's host, his face pale as chalk. He demanded audience with Stannis, and when admitted, his words fell like stones. "King Renly is dead." The tent fell silent. Even the crackle of the brazier seemed to fade. "How?" Ned demanded. The rider swallowed hard. A shadow, shaped like a man but darker, colder. It slipped into his tent as he slept. None could stop it. It struck, and he was gone. His knights swear it was sorcery. They whisper your name, Stannis. They say you called the darkness. Stannis said nothing. His face was stone, but his silence screamed louder than any denial. Ned's hands curled into fists. He saw it now. The cost of standing beside this man. He had chosen law, but law had been twisted by fire and shadow. His honor felt poisoned, tainted by deeds he had not done but could not deny. Outside, the world shifted in an instant. Renly's great host shattered like glass. Some lords bent the knee to Stannis, fearful or convinced by Melisandre's fire. Others fled in outrage, their banners vanishing into the south, and in the chaos the Tyrells withdrew entirely, their knights turning their faces toward Highgarden, leaving the Baratheon cause divided. The balance of power had changed, but not in the way Ned had hoped. Yes, Renly was gone, and Stannis' host swelled with new men, but it was victory poisoned by whispers. The realm did not see justice. It saw sorcery. Fear spread faster than loyalty, and already the Reach muttered of vengeance. That night, Ned sat alone by the fire, his sword laid across his knees. He thought of Robert, of the man who had won his crown with steel and fury, not shadows. He thought of the children he had left in King's Landing, of Robb, now called king in the north, of Catelyn, waiting with hope that he could keep their family safe. And he wondered, for the first time, if he had chosen wrongly. The wolf had bound itself to the stag, but the stag had given its soul to fire, and fire, once loosed, does not obey. The news of Renly's death spread faster than any raven could fly. Lords whispered of shadows with the face of Stannis, of sorcery and blood magic. By the time the sun had set twice, the tale had grown darker still. that Stannis had murdered his own brother in the night, that he had sold his soul to a red witch from the east. At first, Ned tried to fight the whispers. He reminded men that Renly had risen without claim, that Stannis was Robert's true heir, that law must be upheld. But when he looked into their eyes, he saw fear, not faith. They bowed to Stannis, yes, but it was the bowing of men before a storm, not before a king. The Tyrell's departure cut deeper than any sword. Their armies melted away, returning to Highgarden, their loyalty lost forever. Renly had been their bright flower, their chosen king, and they would not forgive his death. Ned could already imagine Margaery's eyes, cold as steel beneath her. Smiles, her family's hunger for vengeance simmering like coals. In council, Stannis spoke only of pressing forward. With Renly gone, the realm has no choice but to accept my crown. Tywin is bloodied, the Tyrells have fled. Now is the time to march on King's Landing and seize what is mine. Ned bristled. It will not be so simple. You may wear the crown, by law, but in the eyes of the realm you are tainted. They whisper sorcery, fratricide, shadows. You will find more enemies than friends if you force the march. Stannis' jaw tightened. Let them whisper, let them curse. In the end, they will kneel, for I am the one true king. Davos shifted uneasily beside him, but said nothing. His eyes met Ned's for a fleeting moment, and in that silence the truth was clear. Even the Onion Knight doubted, though loyalty bound his tongue. As the armies moved east toward the capital, Ned began to see the cracks widen. Northern lords grumbled in their tents, their loyalty to Stannis already fraying. We came for honor, they muttered, but what honor lies in shadows? Robb tried to calm them, speaking as both king and son of the North, but even his words carried little weight when fear gnawed at the men's hearts. One night, in the quiet of his command tent, Robb confronted his father. They do not trust Stannis. They trust me. If we remain bound to him, we will lose them. Ned's face was heavy with weariness. I swore to Stannis, Robb. By law, he is Robert's heir. To break that oath would make me no better than the lions. Robb's eyes were fierce, but young. And what of the North? Am I to bow forever to a man who kills his kin with shadows? The men call me king. They will not bow, father. Not even for you. The words cut deep, deeper than any sword. Ned saw in his son the truth of it. The North was slipping away from his grasp, sliding into a future he could not stop. He had bent honor for law, but now even law crumbled beneath. Fire and fear. Meanwhile, Tywin Lannister moved like a serpent in the west. His defeat had been costly, but he was no man to lick wounds for long. With Renly gone, he turned his gaze southward, offering his daughter and her children as martyrs, victims of Stannis' supposed sorcery. He sent gold and promises to Highgarden, whispering that the Tyrells would find vengeance best served at his side, and in the Reach, hungry ears listened. By the time Stannis and Ned neared King's Landing, the city itself was restless. The small folk muttered that another king marched to burn them, that demons walked beside him in red. Bread riots flared in the streets, and though the gates opened to the rightful heir, there was no cheer, no songs, no welcome. Inside the Red Keep, Ned saw his daughters again, Sansa pale and frightened, Arya fierce and defiant, but their relief was dampened by the weight of the city's fear. Even children could sense it. The realm did not see salvation in Stannis. It saw doom. That night Ned walked the halls alone, the stone walls heavy with memory. Robert's laughter still seemed to echo faintly, a ghost that mocked the silence. He thought of how differently things might have gone had he chosen another path, had he warned Cersei earlier, or bent to Renly, or even seized the crown himself. Each choice seemed now like stepping stones across a river of blood, and whichever stone he chose, the current pulled him deeper into darkness. Stannis stood on the battlements, gazing over the black waters of the bay. The throne is mine, He said coldly, "No man will take it from me." But Ned knew the truth. The throne might be his by law, but law alone could not hold a realm. Fear had taken root, and fear was the deadliest foe of all, and in the distance, far beyond the dark waters, sails were stirring. Sails not of lion or stag or wolf, but of dragon. The Red Keep stood silent under a grey sky. From its battlements, Ned Stark looked out across King's Landing, the smoke of countless hearths rising to mingle with the mist. Below, the city groaned like a wounded beast, its people hungry, fearful, whispering of shadows and doom. They had a king, yes, but not one they loved. Stannis sat the Iron Throne, rigid and grim, the crown heavy upon his brow. He held court, with all the mercy of winter. Thieves lost hands, traitors lost heads, and the small folk lost faith. "Law is law," Stannis said, when Ned tried to temper his justice. "If the realm hates me for it, then let them hate. They will still obey." But obedience is brittle when built on fear. Already Tywin had turned Highgarden against him. Lannister gold and Tyrell swords braided into one, forming an alliance that gleamed brighter than Stannis's cold iron. The Reach had abandoned him, the Westerlands were his enemies, and even the Vale sat idle. The Stag and the Wolf held the young capital, but the realm slipped through their fingers like sand. Ned felt the weight of it heavier each day. The North clamoured for Robb, the young king who fought with fire in his eyes. His bannermen whispered of independence, of breaking free from southern wars that bled their sons dry. "The North remembers," they said, "but the North does not kneel." Ned tried to hold them, but he saw it in Robb's face, the pride, the certainty. He was his mother's son as much as his father's, stubborn as stone, fierce as the river. The North would not wait forever, and then came the sails. The first ships were sighted by fishermen at Dragonstone, black sails, marked with red, cutting across the narrow sea. Whispers spread like wildfire. Daenerys Targaryen, last of her line, had come at last. She was not the frightened girl of whispers, but a queen reborn in fire. With her sailed 3 dragons, small, yet growing enough to turn fear into devotion. When the news reached King's Landing, the court trembled. Even Stannis, unshaken by battle and betrayal, faltered. "Dragons," he muttered, his hand tightening on the throne's arm. "Curses long dead, risen again. How can law stand against fire made flesh?" Ned felt the chill run through him. He remembered Aerys's madness, Robert's rebellion, the fields burned by dragonfire. The return of the Targaryens meant another war, another river of blood. The lords bickered in council. Some urged to strike at sea, to burn Daenerys before her dragons grew too large. Others whispered of alliance, of marriage, of binding fire to their cause. Stannis dismissed them all, his face like carved granite. "The Iron Throne is mine," he said. "No dragon girl, no lion, no rose, no wolf will take it from me. I will burn the world before I yield." Ned stared at him long and hard. Once he had bent his honor for this man, believing law and duty would save the realm. Now he saw only fire in his eyes, a fire as dangerous as the dragons across the sea. That night he walked the godswood within the Red Keep, the heart tree brought from the north long ago. He knelt beneath its pale leaves and prayed, not for victory but for peace. Yet even in prayer he knew peace would never come. Too many crowns, too many claims, too much blood already spilled. Arya found him there, silent as a shadow. She crept close and whispered, "Father, will we go home soon?" His heart ached. He looked at her small, fierce face and thought of Winterfell, of snow and quiet, of the life he might have lived had he chosen differently, but war had chained them to this place. He brushed her hair back gently and said, "One day, little one, the North will always be our home." But even as he spoke, he wondered if the North would still stand when this storm was done. In the weeks that followed, the realm fractured further. Robb pulled his banners northward, claiming independence, unwilling to bleed for Stannis' throne. The Riverlands followed him, torn between loyalty to Tully and fury at the Lions. The Tyrells and Lannisters marched together, their golden host swelling. And across the sea, Daenerys gathered ships and followers, her dragons growing with each sunrise. Stannis still clung to the throne, but his grip was that of a drowning man clutching stone. Ned knew at last the truth he had long denied. His choice had not saved the realm. It had only delayed its breaking. He had tried to bind the wolf to the stag, but in the end, both had been consumed by fire. Fire of sorcery, fire of ambition, and soon, fire of dragons. On a cold dawn, he stood again upon the battlements, watching. The city below stir awake. He thought of Robert's laughter, of Jon Arryn's wisdom, of the honor he had tried to carry like a sword through darkness. He thought of the blood spilled, the families broken, the sons buried before their time, and he whispered into the wind, as though to the gods themselves, "If this is victory, may the realm never know defeat." The wolf had chosen, the stag had ruled, but in the end, it was fire that would inherit the ashes.